Hey there YouTube, welcome to my channel, Tech Engineering. My name is Lawrence and this is video log number 12. In this video I'm going to walk through a project or a program I built to send myself the public IP address, in other words, the wide area network address, because like most, I'm behind a DHCP server from the internet service provider. That means the IP address will change time to time. So today I'm going to demonstrate how we can use a Raspberry Pi to email ourselves the IP address whenever it changes. Now why do we need to do this? Well, sometimes when we're away from home we want to be able to access things that are at home in our local network, such as Jupyter Notebook or our pictures or any other data that's at home, but we want to be able to access it from outside. And therefore we need to know what is our public IP address. So
first thing we should do, let's go check out what ipfi.org is. So ipfi.org. It is simply a website or a web API that will expose your IP address to you. So essentially what's going on behind the scene is there's a server-side script that when you make an HTTP request will log your MAC address and your IP address and a bunch of other stuff, because the server knows where the request is coming from, the client side, which is you. So once you make that connection, it's just going to spit back just one of the many items it logs or it knows about your request. So one of which is your public IP address or your wide area network address, which is the address that people know you from, because the local address would be what's behind your router. Okay, so what do we do with this? We want to be able to access or be able to read this address first through Python. So let's go ahead and do that. Okay, so we're done with testing ipfi.org. Next, let's open up a notebook. I call this sort of DDNS, but I'll explain that later on another video. But essentially, we're going to test it out. You know, many of you probably noticed that I use my Jupyter Notebook in my Raspberry Pi as, well, Jupyter Notebook is not mine, but Jupyter Notebook in my Raspberry Pi as my IDE. You know, I like to just test things out here first before I go and script the whole thing. Okay, so right away what you should do, let's get started. You would want to import url_lib.request and JSON. That's pretty much all you're going to need. Many of you are going to probably complain, why am I not using things like import http.client? I'm kind of comfortable with url_lib, and so I tend to use that a lot. And you're okay to use that if you know how to. That's okay. All right. So first, what you want to do is create a request variable, and the request is going to be url_lib.request uppercase request. My tab complete is not working. You know, my Raspberry Pi is kind of it's not slow. It's downstairs. I'm just going to type it. There we go. It completed. Alright, so the URL is going to be this guy, right? And it will, so my URL, it will come back, the response is going to come back in JSON formatted value. Okay, so that's that. You don't need anything else. You don't need to type in the headers, nothing else. This is just fine. And my response is going to be url_lib.request.url open, and you're just going to feed in the request variable. Okay, everything sounds good. Good. Alright, so my data is going to be response.read. So what does my data look like? Boom, my data looks like that. Okay, next what you want to do is you want to parse that, and you would do that by JSON. So parsed data is equal to JSON.loads, and I believe you could type in data, but you should probably decode that, right? But I think it came back as a byte array. Okay, there we go. Parsed data now looks like that. And what you can do is say, give me my IP from that data. There we go. So essentially, you are getting this. What you just did with a web browser, you did it through Python, a scripting language. Perfect. Next, let's create the logic where, so you know the idea behind this is we want to update ourselves we want to email ourselves the IP address if it changed. So what we want to do is we want to first save the file, in a file, save the current IP address. Then go fetch the new IP address. And if the new one has changed, which doesn't look, I'm not going to look for if it increased up or down because we don't really know. I'm just going to check if the new one is equal to the last one. If not, then the new one must be the newest IP address, and therefore write the new one into the file and email myself the new one. That's basically the logic. Alright, so we're done with this part. Next, what we want to do is we want to compare. We want to compare local versus, well, past versus new IP address, right? Okay, so to do that, what I'm going to do is first I'm going to create a text file, and I'm simply going to take my IP address, this one, and I'm going to change it up a little bit and pretend that it's something like this. Suppose it was like this. Well, yesterday or just moments ago it was this, and this would be my, let's say, IP, I call it IP.dat. Okay, I'm going to save it and close it. So what I'm going to do is current IP, well, file is equal to open, I believe it's IP.dat, and essentially what you want to do is file.read would give you that, right? So my current is, again, well, sorry, I should read that together. File.dat, sorry, read. It looks like that. So this is my current file IP address, and this is my new one. So what we want to do is we want to read the current and check if the new one equals that. If not, save it. Okay. So let's write all these things down. Alright, like this. We don't need that. All we need is this part. Response is get the latest IP from IP5. We want to say that. And you want to say data.response.read. And you also want to parse it. And you also want to get this, correct? So, like that. Now here's the logic. If, right, parse does not equal local, it's not really local IP address. Local IP address would be, let's call it previous IP address. Previous IP address, previous IP, like that. Okay, so if my local, if a parsed IP address, which is the current, the latest, if it isn't equal to that, I'm gonna save it back into that file. Okay. It's actually important that we probably close the file like that once it's done, right? We want to point to the file and then say if it doesn't equal to my previous IP, good, then what you want to do is I'm just going to print it for now, right? I'm going to call it parsed data. Let's look at it that way. There. Perfect. So if it isn't, right? Of course it doesn't because we changed it to that. Maybe I should just print them, right? Print the previous IP like that. Okay, this is my previous, and because the current IP does not equal to the previous, I'm just going to print them out. Now the latest thing I should do is let's write it back into the file. So I'm going to say again, file is equal to open ip.dat, and I'm going to open it with the write action, okay, with W. That means write it. Oh, by the way, this needs to be inside a quotation. Great. And then I'm going to say file.write. What I'm going to write? I'm going to write parsed data. Sorry, parsed data. And give me the IP. It's an associated array, I think. Okay, and that should be it, right? So let's do that. I'm gonna get rid of this, and that should be good. Oh, by the way, we also have to file.close. We want to close the file once we're done writing it. Okay, here goes nothing. Done. So now let's check it again. What does it look like? Okay, print previous IP. There we go. Remember, we started off with 1.53, and then we wrote the file to be this. We wrote the file with the newest. So let's do it again. Why don't we take my ip.dat and save it, 1.53. All right, save and close. Just close the file this way. Okay. Should probably say print previous previous IP is that. Good. And again, same thing. It doesn't equal to the previous one. I'm just going to write the previous IP address. I'm going to replace the file with the newest. Okay, good. Let's read it back. There. Perfect. So the logic works. Next, let's email them. Now let's code up the logic to email the IP address to my email address. And before you continue, I think it's probably worth noting that you should probably watch this video here, and here's a link in the corner. Watch the other video how I wrote this script. I basically wrote a script so that I don't have to recreate the procedure to email it. I wrote a class that I can just call and just plug in the information into the function, and it will just do the job for me. So watch that video and come right back. Okay, so email the IP address. I'm going to import sys, and because my sys.path.path, because my that script I wrote exists in a different directory, I'm going to, and that directory is called Python scripts and exists in my home directory. So, all right, then I can say I can say from transmission import email. I call email is equal to email, and I should instantiate it using what's called, I have two versions. One is localhost or Gmail. I'm going to use Gmail. Basically, I'm going to use Gmail's SMTP server, use Gmail's SMTP server to send out the email. There. So email dot send email, and it's going to take from. So from is going to be, I'm going to get a little cheeky, I'm going to call it John Snow at Raspberry Pi. And my to is going to be myself, lawrencecon@gmail.com. Feel free to email me with questions. This is my public email, IP address, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to say my parsed IP, right? So I'm going to say my parsed data IP there. Oops. Oh, sorry, I think it should say subject and message. There, sent. Now let's go check it out. And here we go. So that was the email that was sent from my Raspberry Pi. You know, it didn't say it's from Jon Snow. We know this if you were following my other video. Because I'm using Google's SMTP server and also what's it called, using my own authentication to log in, so it's gonna disregard that it's from there. Okay, so I can probably, let's try it again. Let's get a little clever. What do we say? Localhost. I hope my postfix is turned on. Okay, there. And I'm gonna send it again. See if it's sent. Now it was sent. There we go. So it came from Jon Snow at Raspberry Pi, and the IP address is this. Great. So how do we put them together? So let's go back. What we want to do is we want to put this little function inside here, right? So what we want to say is if the parsed data is not equal to the previous IP address, it's going to email it. So let's do it again. It's not going to work because why? Remember, we already rewrote the file. So I'm going to alter it in a bit just to show you that it works. All right. So let's enter. Previous IP address is it ends with 154. Therefore, it's not going to send me a new email. But why don't we go back and change it to 153? So we're going to see this thing in action. Okay, save it, close it, and do it again. This time we're going to get a new email. There we go. Previous IP is 153. Well, ends with 153. Therefore, I should have gotten a new email. Look, Jon Snow too, right? There we go. So that's it. There we go. So we're done with this part too. The next step is to put them all together in one script. Alright, so I'm ready to write the script and automate the whole process. Before I go ahead and do that, I just want to mention there are a couple of things I've changed. I decided to change, instead of writing the new IP address into the file, I want to also save the time it was updated. It's going to help me to debug maybe, or to log things, or even I've got a couple other projects in mind in the future that's going to require for me to know when I update it. So it's gonna be a JSON string like this. So this is what we've worked on, but a slightly modified version of this is basically I'm going to read the file and then load it because it's a JSON string. I'm going to turn them into a dictionary and later on manipulate the dictionary such like this. So here's my local data, right? And once I make a connection to ipfi.org, get the local IP address, sorry, the new IP address, the exposed IP address, and then save it like this, right? Local data IP is equal to the new IP if the new and the local doesn't match. And then also make sure you save the current time when it was updated, basically, and then turn the whole thing into a JSON string and write the string into the file, just like how we did before here. Before we just wrote the IP address directly into the file, but we're gonna write it into a JSON string and then save the file. And lastly, send the email out. Okay, so that's pretty much the update, and let's code this up. Okay. Okay, so now that it's done, let's ship him off to my Raspberry Pi and test him out. If you guys have been following my videos for a while, you know that I like to code my scripts on my Mac and then upload it to my Raspberry Pi. Okay, it's going to be SAP at Pi at Raspberry Pi colon. It's gonna be in my home Python scripts. Okay, I'm gonna send it directly into the directory. There we go. And type in my password. Oops, I messed that up. Okay, that's in. Let's log in. And password. All right, so I'm in. Let's go to my Python scripts. I can say Python 3 and IP update.py. And it went. Let's go check it out. There we go. The email is sent. And did we save the file? Did we save the new information into the file ip.dat? And we did. There we go. All right. Okay. So writing the script is done. Test and run is also done. Now let's go and automate this thing through what's called a cron job. Okay, so cron job is basically the job scheduler or a task scheduler in a Unix system. You call upon cron job using what's called a cron tab or cron table, short for cron table. Cron tab command opens up an editor where you can edit the table. And the table has basic structure like this, where each of these asterisks denotes the time of the day, the hour, also month and day of the week, basically different slices of time. And it follows by what's called a command to execute, and then you just type in what you want to execute. So what we're going to do is we're going to run, just for testing purposes, we're going to run it every minute, and we'll see how it performs. And so before I do that, I'm going to change a couple of things. I'm going to comment this out, and this doesn't really matter, but I just want to make it look a little bit more nicer. I don't want to say Johnson, it's Pi. It doesn't really matter because it's always gonna say It's me because I'm using my own Gmail's what's it called, SMTP server, and I'm authenticating it by myself, so it knows that I'm sending it from myself, so it doesn't matter what I say here. But I like to say Pi at Raspberry Pi. And I'm also going to comment this part out because here I don't want it to update. I just want to keep it running just to test it out that it runs. Ultimately, what I really want to do is run it every hour. So I'll show you how that works. Again, let me exit out of here. Send my newly saved script into Raspberry Pi. Login. Good. Then what I want to do is I want to first edit. Let's go to my Python scripts and ip.dat, and I want to change this because I wanted to say this. Okay, Control X, yes, and save. Good. And then what you want to do is type in crontab-e. That means let's edit the cron tab. Okay. Here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to edit a line. And the line here is, I'm just going to take this empty line right here and insert. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the beginning of these series of asterisks and I'm going to divide this by 1. This says run it every minute. Okay. And what am I going to run? I'm going to run home pi vnv bin python 3. Okay. And the script is going to be home pi python scripts ip update.py. Okay, that should be good. Okay, let me just make sure that everything is clear and spelled correctly. SCRI scripts. Okay, good. Control X. Done. So installing new cron tab. It says that. It's okay. And what I'm going to do is you could also type in crontab -l or -l. It will list you the items you have. So right here. Okay, so we're just going to wait and see if it runs every minute, and we'll know if I get an email here. There we go. Got my first email. Now let's see and wait if I get an email every minute for a couple of minutes. Okay, so it seems like it's working. Good. Right, so what I want to do is let's go ahead and turn this off. Well, let me see if I can change. We don't need to turn off anything actually. Going to edit that. Good. Good, very good. That's about it, right? And I don't need to print anything. I'll just leave it there. Okay, let's exit. Let's ship them again. Okay. Log in. Okay, now what I'm going to do is cron tab E. I'm going to edit the page, sorry, the table. I'm going to change this to 0. All right, and that's it. That's going to make it run every hour on the hour. Okay, and that's it. That's about what concludes the tutorial. I'm gonna share this code with you on GitHub. I hope this works out for you. Thanks. Bye.